The galaxy had always loved its maps. Every empire, from the tiniest merchant guild to the grandest stellar dominion, spent fortunes charting the stars. Entire universities were devoted to cartography. Star charts were updated weekly, sometimes daily. To travel without one was madness. To sell one was wealth. To own a complete archive of the known galaxy was prestige beyond compare. And yet, there was the black patch. On every chart, across every database, the void remained. A blank circle, perfectly round, perfectly avoided, sitting in the middle of the Orion arm. Ships traced routes around it, trade lines bent awkwardly to avoid touching it. No hyperlane passed through it. No names were written inside. Only 2 words marked it: human space. For Kale, a young cartographer from the Zathri Union, the existence of this void was an unbearable itch. He had mapped asteroid belts no one cared for, charted the shifting orbits of rogue planets, and traced nebulae into beautiful fractal detail. He lived for the order of maps, for the way chaos could be drawn into lines and coordinates. But the void mocked him. "How can you call this complete?" Kale demanded of his superior one evening, slamming a holographic star map onto the table. "It's a wound in the chart. We pretend it's space, but it's nothing. Why does no one dare to fill it?" His superior, an aged reptilian whose scales had dulled to gray, gave a sharp hiss. "Because, boy, we value survival over symmetry. Forget the blankness. Every cartographer who tried to correct it is gone." Kale blinked. "Gone? As in dead? Dead, vanished, or worse? Their names stricken from the archives. Their work erased. It is as if they never existed." The older cartographer leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "There are rules unwritten but obeyed, Kale. Do not draw borders where humans walk. Do not trace their stars. Do not mark their worlds. You will not be thanked for curiosity. You will be punished for trespass." That should have been warning enough. But Kale was not like the others. He believed in truth, in knowledge, in leaving behind a perfect chart that would outlive him. And so, late at night when no one was watching, he began to dig. At first, the archives yielded nothing but locked files. Entire centuries of records were sealed by the Galactic Council. But Kale knew how to peel away layers of encryption, and eventually, fragments appeared. They were not official reports. They were whispers, scraps, forbidden notes passed from one desperate cartographer to another. Attempted to chart the periphery of human space. 37 systems confirmed. Transmitted coordinates. Fleet disappeared 3 days later. No survivors. The Athari Confederacy once mapped human worlds. They do not exist anymore. The act of drawing borders was perceived as intent. And intent was punished. The more Kale read, the colder his blood ran. The fragments described wars no history book recorded, fleets that had been erased so completely that even their wreckage was never found. Names of species he had never heard of, species that, apparently, no longer existed. But it was the last message that unsettled him most. Do not try to see them. They are watching the watchers. Still, Kale pressed on. He accessed a forgotten survey probe buried deep in the Zathri database, one that had skirted dangerously close to the void before its signal cut. He reran its data, cleaning away noise. For a heartbeat, just a flicker, he saw a star system: yellow sun, blue-green world, metal glints in orbit. And then the image collapsed into static as if erased by an unseen hand. Kale's spine stiffened. The probe had seen something alive. He should have stopped there. But obsession drove him further. He began secretly compiling his own map of the void, piece by piece, system by system, using stolen records and fragmented transmissions. The map grew, glowing lines and coordinates filling the once black circle. He felt triumph. He was doing what no one else dared. But then, his systems went dark. The lights in his chamber flickered out. His console shut down. The map he had drawn dissolved into static before his eyes. A voice, calm and steady, spoke from the shadows. "You should not have done that." Kale froze. The voice was not Zathri. It was not any alien tongue he knew. It was human. From the darkness, a figure stepped forward. Humanoid, taller than Kale, with eyes that seemed to burn not with anger, but with infinite patience worn thin. How are you here?" Kale stammered. The figure did not answer at first. Instead, it touched Kale's console, and with a single motion restored the star map to perfection. Except, the void was gone. In its place were hundreds of systems, glowing bright, each line drawn sharper than Kale could ever manage. "You wish to know why the galaxy does not map our space?" the human asked softly. "It is because maps are weapons. They show intent. To draw our borders is to declare preparation. And when preparation is seen, retaliation follows. Kale's throat tightened. But, I only wanted truth. The human's eyes softened, almost with pity. Truth is not free. Every civilization that tried to draw us in detail no longer exists. They thought a map was harmless. But a map is a claim. And we do not permit claims. The glowing stars on the map began to dim, fading back into the void. Forget this, the human said. Forget me. Forget what you saw. For your sake, and for your people's. And then in a blink the figure was gone. Kale awoke at his desk hours later, heart racing. His console was blank. His private files were wiped. The map of the void was gone. But when he checked the galactic archives, the blankness remained. Human space, untouched, unmarked, avoided. He thought of telling someone, of warning them that humanity was watching even now. But he didn't. Because he knew the truth, the galaxy already understood. That was why no one dared to chart it. The void was not ignorance. The void was a scar. A scar the galaxy refused to touch again. And so, on every map the circle remained. Empty. Silent. Labeled with two words that carried more weight than any fleet, any empire, any star. Human space. The Galactic Council's library was the most complete archive in the known universe. Entire civilizations had entrusted their knowledge to its vaults, believing that if their empires one day fell, at least their memory would survive. Every war, every treaty, every discovery, it was all recorded, catalogued, and preserved. Everywhere, that is, except for the blankness. On the central star map, in the heart of the Orion Arm, stretched a void no scholar could ignore. Where thousands of systems should have been charted, there was only emptiness. It was marked with two words as if those were explanation enough. Human space. Lauren was a historian, not a cartographer. His passion lay in piecing together forgotten stories from fragments of the past. But the longer he worked in the Council's archives, the more he noticed something strange. Entire centuries were missing. Not missing because they hadn't been recorded, but missing because someone had cut them out. Species that had once rivaled the great empires were barely footnotes. Fleets that should have been legendary had vanished without trace. And always at the edges of these lost records appeared the same name, humans. Most scholars refused to touch the subject. When Lauren asked about it, colleagues turned away, their voices hushed. That history is sealed, they said. For your own sake, don't dig deeper. But for Lauren, warnings were invitations. It began when he found a book, an actual paper-bound journal, a rarity from a time before digital records. It had been misplaced in the archives, filed under an extinct species no one remembered. Its cover was scarred, its words scrawled in a desperate hand. Lauren read the first page and felt his throat tighten. We thought them weak. We thought them myths. We were wrong. Gods help us all, we were wrong. The journal belonged to a soldier of the Valari Dominion, a once mighty empire whose name was now little more than a whisper. The Valari, Lauren knew, had vanished without explanation thousands of years ago. Their disappearance was one of the galaxy's great mysteries. But here, in shaky lines of ink, was the truth. The Valari had tried to map human space. The journal described how their explorers had charted the first human systems, labeling their worlds, cataloging their defenses, preparing the groundwork for conquest. To the Valari it was routine. Every star, every border drawn was a declaration of intent. And then, humans noticed. They came not as diplomats, the soldier wrote, but as storms. We mapped 20 of their stars. In reply they erased 20 of ours. Entire fleets shattered in minutes. Weapons turned against us as if they knew how we built them. We thought it coincidence. We thought it luck. But each battle grew worse. The words grew darker with each page. Descriptions of colonies burning, fleets of thousands vanishing into silence, entire Valari worlds scoured clean. They fight like they remember every war they ever waged, the soldier wrote. As if they have rehearsed our defeat long before we began it. Their ships are not just metal and fire, they are judgment given form. Lauren's hands trembled as he turned the final pages. The soldier had survived long enough to write only one conclusion. It was the maps. The moment we drew their borders, they saw our intent. We thought knowledge was power. To them it was warning. And warnings are answered with annihilation. This will be my last entry. The skies burn above me. Soon there will be no Valari left to read these words. If any survive, do not map human space. Do not even try. The final line was underlined 3 times, the ink smeared with what might have been tears. Lauren sat frozen, the weight of history pressing down on him. He had uncovered not just the fate of the Valari, But the reason the galaxy still refused to map human space, it wasn't ignorance. It was memory. It was fear. The Council hadn't erased those records to hide them from scholars. They had erased them to protect the galaxy itself. Because if knowledge spread too widely, someone ambitious, someone arrogant, might try again. And the cycle would repeat. But curiosity is a poison of its own. Loren couldn't stop thinking about the journal. He began hunting deeper, pulling files sealed by the Council's highest security. What he found was worse. The Valari hadn't been the only ones. The Jathri clans, the Athari Confederacy, even the Soral Imperium, all had tried in different ages to chart human space. All had vanished. Sometimes slowly, sometimes overnight. But always, inevitably. Species that had rivaled the galaxy's greatest powers were now dust. And in every case their last recorded act was the same: mapping human borders. One night, as Loren sat in the archives piecing together the fragments, he noticed something strange. His console flickered. Files he hadn't yet accessed began opening on their own. And across the holographic display, words appeared, words he hadn't typed. "You've read enough." Loren's pulse quickened. "Who's there?" he whispered. The console answered. "You think you study the past. But the past watches you." He stumbled back from the desk, his heart's pounding. The voice wasn't Council security. It wasn't a colleague. It was something else. The words shifted again. "We left warnings for a reason. If you persist, your people will share their fate." Loren shut down the console, but the words burned in his mind. He thought of the Valari soldiers' last entry. He thought of the vanished civilizations, of the blank void on every star map. The galaxy hadn't forgotten humanity's wrath. It had buried it, covered it, pretended the danger was gone. But the truth was simple: the galaxy was still alive because it had learned one lesson. Do not map human space. Do not even try. The next morning, Loren returned the journal to the archives. He resealed the files he had opened. He forced his hands to stop shaking. And when his colleagues asked what he had been working on, he smiled weakly and said, "Nothing of importance." But in his mind, the soldiers' words echoed like a curse. "We thought them weak. We thought them myths. We were wrong." And so, the maps of the galaxy remained incomplete. Not from ignorance. Not from neglect. But because those who once tried to complete them were gone. The blankness was not an error. It was a grave. A warning carved into the very charts themselves. And the galaxy, remembering its ghosts, chose fear over curiosity. That was why human space would never be mapped. In the age of faster-than-light travel, maps were life itself. Merchants depended on them to chart profitable routes. Explorers relied on them to avoid drifting into black holes or collapsing stars. Armies studied them to plan campaigns that could stretch across thousands of light-years. A complete map of the galaxy wasn't just valuable, it was survival. And yet, in every archive, on every console, the most important map of all carried a blankness. A black circle. It was labeled with two words: human space. Dax Rin was not a scholar nor a soldier. He was a smuggler. His crew trafficked in rare minerals, stolen relics, and anything the empires considered restricted. But there was one commodity more valuable than weapons, more dangerous than contraband: maps. Whispers told of hidden hyperspace corridors that shaved months off trade runs. Rumors spoke of uncharted systems rich with resources. To own such knowledge was to own wealth beyond imagination. And so, when Dax heard of a data crystal supposedly containing fragments of human star charts, he couldn't resist. "Fake," his first mate, Kirill, warned, her scaled brow furrowing. "No one has ever made it out with those intact." "Then we'll be the first," Dax grinned, holding the crystal up to the light. The crystal's data was fragmented, corrupted. But enough coordinates remained for a route, straight into the unmarked void. The crew was nervous. The galaxy's warnings were legend. Ships that vanished, explorers that never returned, traders who swore the stars themselves moved inside human territory. But credits bought loyalty, and Dax promised them all a fortune if they succeeded. "Think about it," he said, leaning over the NAV console. "Everyone avoids this space. Which means untapped markets. Rich worlds. Maybe even human tech. We'll be ghosts slipping through a graveyard. No one will stop us." He was wrong. At first, the journey was ordinary. The ship slipped past the edge of the marked charts, leaving behind the familiar glow of known systems. Stars still shone ahead, scattered like gems on black velvet. The crew relaxed. But then, strangeness crept in. The stars shifted. Not the way stars normally shifted, not the gentle drift of distant suns. These moved in ways that made no sense, patterns rearranging when no one looked directly at them. Sensors screamed conflicting reports. One moment a cluster of 10 suns, the next moment only 3. "It's a glitch," Dax muttered, tapping the console. But when he glanced up, he swore the stars outside the viewport were closer than they had been seconds ago. Too close. Kirill's voice trembled. "Dax, the stars are moving around us." Days, or what felt like days, passed. Time blurred. The crew stopped sleeping properly. Each night, they woke from the same dream, standing on the surface of a blue-green world, looking up at a burning sky. They didn't speak of it at first, but eventually realized they were dreaming together. The navigator, a pale insectoid named Veth, snapped first. He tore out his antennae screaming, "They're in my head. They don't want us here," before throwing himself into the airlock. The ship never recovered his body. The void swallowed him whole. Still Dax pressed on. "We're close," he insisted, though he no longer knew what close meant. Coordinates shifted on their own. Paths they had marked were erased, replaced by new routes that seemed to guide them deeper. It was Kirill who finally asked the question none dared speak aloud. What if it's not space? What if this isn't emptiness at all, but something alive? The thought rooted itself in Dax's mind, growing darker with every passing hour. What if human space wasn't uncharted because it was unknown, but because it couldn't be charted? Because the very act of looking at it changed it? What if human space watched back? They reached what the crystal claimed was a human system. A yellow sun, a world of oceans and continents. For a moment, Dax felt triumph. Proof at last. He could sell this, map it, be rich beyond imagining. But as soon as he logged the coordinates, the world blinked. One instant it was there. The next gone. The system unraveled before his eyes, stars scattering like ash. The crew screamed as their instruments went mad, readings collapsing into static. Then the ship fell silent. Dax stood at the viewport, staring into the void. No stars. No planets. Nothing but blackness stretching forever. Yet he felt something pressing in, immense and suffocating, like standing at the bottom of an ocean. And then he heard it, a voice. Not through speakers. Not in his ears. In his mind. "Why do you draw lines upon us?" Dax's knees buckled. He gasped, clutching his head. We only wanted knowledge. The voice rumbled, vast as eternity. Knowledge is claim. Claim is intent. Intent is invasion. And we have learned well what invasions mean. Images flooded Dax's mind, fleets burning, empires crumbling, entire species erased. Ghosts of wars fought long before his time. Those who tried to map us thought to bind us with borders. They are gone. Do you wish to join them? Dax screamed, "No. We only wanted profit." The void pulsed. The stars flickered back into view, yet they were wrong. Bent, twisted, as if arranged into an eye staring directly at his ship. The crew fell to their knees, sobbing, praying to gods that would never hear them. And then the voice whispered its final warning. "Remember this, human space is not drawn. Human space draws you. Live, forget, or be forgotten." Dax never remembered how they escaped. One moment the void pressed in on all sides, the next the ship staggered into the familiar light of mapped space. Half the crew was gone. Veth was dead. Kirill's scales had turned completely white. Dax himself woke screaming every night from the same dream, standing on that blue-green world beneath the burning sky. He tried to sell the data crystal, but it was blank. Wiped clean. No coordinates, no proof. Just emptiness. The galaxy laughed at him. No one believed his story. And yet, no one dared enter human space after him. Because the map still carried the same black circle. Empty. Silent. Waiting. Not from ignorance. Not from lack of courage. But because the galaxy understood the truth. Human space was not territory. It was not a place to chart. It was a living darkness. And those who tried to measure it never returned.